Bob, if I come to the first important point, something that I know you've been very vocal about, obviously we are seeing that we're now getting closer and closer to agreement to a permanent or to a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. First of all, I wanted to get your view on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, and whether or not this is something that you think could become a permanent ceasefire overall.
Okay, anything that stops people being killed is a good thing, provided it isn't just an excuse for Hamas to rearm and start killing Jews again, and then in the process they will get lots of Palestinians killed. So because the fighting has stopped and the killing has stopped, that is a good thing. Do I think it's a permanent ceasefire? I think the Israelis are going to get in the first tranche. There's 3 stages to this process. So in the first bit, they start releasing Palestinian prisoners, and Hamas give up 33 Israeli hostages. Some of these people are very old, some of them, toddlers, incredibly young. All the Palestinians being given up are probably 99% fighting age males. Then there's going to be more talks about talks. And the question is then, is it going to stick? I think my gut feeling in Israel is that the war has sort of run its course for the moment, because Hamas has been so degraded, Hezbollah has been so degraded. The question is, are they going to try to recoup for round 2? Eventually Hamas are going to do that, and this is probably going to happen, and it's just going to be unfortunately cyclical, because you've got an organisation dedicated to the slaughter of Jews and the overthrow of the state of Israel. Israel's got a right to defend itself.
I think that's a brilliant synopsis that you've given out there, Bob. My concern is that for every hostage that's freed, I think the ratio is reported around to be 30 to 50 terrorists or criminals who have been imprisoned to be released back. And as you say, many of those will probably have links to terrorist organisations, Hezbollah or Hamas indeed. And ultimately will start essentially the rearming process, I think, which is why I'm sure you will share my sentiment that until all hostages are released, Israel has every right, as far as I'm concerned, to undertake military action in Gaza to bring their people back. But do you think that if this deal does go through, Netanyahu is likely to stay on? It's a lot of talk that the coalition is on the verge of collapsing, and maybe with a new face as the head of the Israeli government, and maybe if the Palestinian Liberation Authority, who I hope would finally find some backbone to take charge of the situation, then a 2-state solution could be found.
I think it's I think 2-state solution is a pipe dream. I really do. I think Palestinian society is so damaged, in part by Israel, but in part by its own vile and chronic leadership, especially under the PLO for decades, when it was basically a Soviet front, or certainly used and armed by the Soviets. And they have been, the time for peace was back around late 90s and early 2000s. And since then, it's just got more desperate. So I don't see a happy future for the Palestinians, I'm afraid, especially when Israel has been ruthless about protecting its own people, and it's done absolute harm to Hamas, absolute harm to Hezbollah, and really trashed the Iranian proxy forces all over the Middle East. That is ruthless democracy in action for you. And I think when it comes to Netanyahu, I think he'll be out. I think there'll be an election, and I think a lot of Jewish voters, and indeed Arab voters in Israel as well, because there's Arabs and Jews who live there, I think they will remember the mistakes that Netanyahu made, and I think probably they will get rid of him. I'm not sure that's going to change much as regards Israel's pretty ruthless approach to its enemies.
Quickly on this topic, before I come to some other ones I want to speak to you, Bob. President-elect Trump, soon-to-be President Trump, was very, very clear, I think it's fair to say, at last week's press conference, that if the hostages were not released and a deal was not done, he would rain hell upon Gaza. Do you think President Trump has already shown his impact on the world stage when it comes to bringing about peace? Do you think this is a welcome intervention by him, or do you think this is the success of the Biden administration?
The trouble is, when he says rain down hell, I'm not sure what that means, because you can't just bomb people indiscriminately, because it'll get the Americans into a hell of a trouble. And I think, so I'm unclear. Look, if you look at Republicans and what they're saying on social media and elsewhere, this is Trump's first great victory. If you look at what Biden supporters are saying, this is Biden's last great victory. So I just think, I know, Jonathan, I know that you like Trump a bit more than I do. I think he's a bit all over the shop. he shakes things up, which we both like, but I also think that he can be pretty irresponsible, and I'm a bit dubious about how he treats and takes the Russians and the Ukrainians. So let's see. But I mean, I like the fact that he doesn't like Iran, and I like the fact that he's a strong supporter of Israel, because Israel has the right to defend itself. And I think that is something that we can all agree with, even actually most Arab states.
No, look, as you say, look, with President Trump, I like the fact that he's a strong man. I think that to stand up to dictators who seek to do democracies and people on the West harm, you need to have strong voices that you can trust and rely on. But I do, and the unpredictability, I think, is something that actually can be an advantage. However, I agree with you on Ukraine. I have a slightly different position to President-elect Trump on that. I think it's important that's the frontier that we defend on, because history is a great teacher. And we know that
get him on your show.
Putin will not stop.
Jonathan.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But I would also like to come to you the fact that we've also seen sort of inside reports about the fact that the defence review that's being undertaken is suggesting that actually, despite what Labour was saying, will not see an increase in armed forces personnel, numbers-wise. And that is leading to a lot of discomfort behind the scenes, particularly when we are trying to reach 2.5% of GDP on defence, and Labour's meant to be setting out this path. Do you think this is a betrayal to the armed forces and another sign of a broken promise by this Labour government?
I do, but I mean, let's emotive language aside, we need to defend ourselves, and we're not defending ourselves enough. And actually what that means is that we just have a lesser and lesser say. I find that very frustrating. You know, as a former serviceman, as someone who's done quite a few tours of duty, I find it very, very painful. And I find it painful because it's also incredibly unnecessary. If we actually ran this state a bit better, whether it's the Tories or Labour in power, we should have a bigger army. We should have a bigger navy, bigger air force. You know, Britain remains a great power with global reach. You know, I'm fed up with people talking us down. We're not a superpower. We don't pretend to be, but we have still a significant and important role to play. And what really grips me is when you've got people like, and we did it a little bit as well, but I'm afraid to say nowhere near Starmer. He sort of says, I'll do whatever it takes. And the problem is Starmer's got a track record. He just says whatever he needs to at the time with zero intent on following through. So we've got him even today, or yesterday, when he was in Kiev, basically saying, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll preserve our great armed forces. We'll support the Ukrainians. Are they spending more money? No. They've got $9 billion to give away to Mauritius to hand over our sovereign territory to a country that's never ever possessed it. You know, messing up our relationship with the Americans and making ourselves look like international muppets of the first order. So we've got billions for trendy left-wing causes. We don't have it for the army.
I don't think there is any better way to end this segment. Thank you